The Hard Talk with Jakim Show.
The Hard Talk with Jakim Show.
The views and opinions expressed in this broadcast do not necessarily reflect or represent the views and opinions of DIN Media Studios. Any questions or concerns about what is said should be directed to the show host or producers. Thank you and enjoy.
Peace and blessings. This is Jakim from the Hard Talk with Jakim Show. Can't get enough of the Hard Talk with Jakim Show? You can email us at btom6164@gmail.com. That's BTHOMP6164@gmail.
Copyright disclaimer under Section 107 of the Copyright Act 1976. Allowance is made for fair use for purposes such as criticism, comment, news reporting, scholarship, and research. Fair use is a use permitted by copyright statute that might otherwise be infringing. Non-profit, educational, or personal use tips the balance in favor of
the
fair
views
use.
expressed at or through this broadcast is those of the individual host and guests in their individual capacities only. The information provided on this broadcast does not and is not intended to constitute legal advice. Instead, all information, content, and materials available on this broadcast are for general informational purposes only. All viewers should contact their attorney to obtain advice with respect.
Peace and blessings, fam. How are you doing? This is your man, Jakim, with the Hard Talk with Jakim Show, man. Listen, I got a great show for you. We're still staying on local politics here in Wilmington, Delaware. That's right. We're going to stay on local politics. I got a great guest for you. But before we do that, I have to mention the Republican National Convention. Yes, I did see it. Yes, I watched 3 nights of it. For you, I watched 3 nights of it. And all I'm saying is that there's a movie that was out that was done by Mike Judge in 2006 called Idiocracy. If you have not seen that movie, you need to see that movie because that's where we're at right now. I know I just got an email from one of our viewers about saying that we're now in The Handmaid's Tale as well, and I'll agree on that. So before we go any further, before I start talking about anything else, let me bring in our guest tonight. Our guest tonight is a candidate for Wilmington City Council, District 7. That's Mr. James Dahlke. Big shout out to you, brother. Big shout out to you. How are you doing?
I'm doing well. Thank you so much for having me on the show this evening, Jakim.
All right, Jason. Well, listen, I got to tell the viewers, this is the first time I'm meeting James. The reason why I really wanted to get James on this week is because I saw a nice picture of him with a nice suit on, and I like people with nice suits, right? It was a great suit. Whoever took that picture, give him a thumbs up from us, man.
Thank you. I will do.
All right. So, well, James, Wilmington, Delaware. Well, our place, I live in a great planet called Dunley, which is right outside of Wilmington, but we have a Wilmington address. So, and today, this has to be day number 34 in our stinky water in Wilmington, and definitely in Dunley. Man, listen, what would you do? Really, what's the question I have for you is what would you do differently if you were elected in District 7? What would you do differently?
Yeah, so first off, my campaign has 4 pillars to it. The first is trust and transparency. The second is development without displacement. And then we've got fees and fines reform, and then fiscal sustainability. So, I really want to start with the trust and transparency because right now, I feel like our city government doesn't do enough to actually reach out to the people, get the people's input, and talk about the issues with them. It feels a lot.
Go ahead, continue.
And like you said, with this situation that's going on with water right now, I don't think I've heard much about it from city government, whether that be council members or the mayors.
Well, listen, you know what? Let me just go back to that, and I love your pillars. What I heard from them was a statement. Nobody got up. And I talked with Don Farrell last week, nobody got up and said, listen, my bad, we did something wrong, and somebody wasn't monitoring something. And all I saw was a statement. This has to be part of the problem that you're talking about with city government and transparency.
Exactly. I mean, at this point, somebody should have been coming out to talk about the issue, right? A statement's nice, but it should be accompanied by some sort of actual speaking, some sort of video that's shared with the people. I follow the administration's newsletter and as well as some of the council members, but you shouldn't have to go out of your way to actively find the information about what's going on in your community. The people in leadership should be actively reaching out to the community and saying, I want you to know that this is what's going on. And I want you to know that these are the problems we have. These are the possible solutions. And what's your input? What do you think we should do? Especially when it comes to the water, Wilmington runs a water utility that not only, provides water for the residents of Wilmington, but for a lot of county residents as well.
Right.
And, I worry about the fiscal sustainability of that water utility because we have seen the rates of water triple in the last 10 to 15 years. And we have a lot of members of our community that can't afford those rates. We've got maybe about 20% of parcels in the city are delinquent on their water bill. That's insane. That's not sustainable. So what that tells me is that either there is an issue with the pricing or there's an issue with us collecting. And I think it's both. Because I think we have residents, low-income residents that are struggling to keep up with the price of water, especially in this inflationary environment where the price of food has gone up, the price of gas has gone up, and now your water's going up as well. And then we also have businesses that have very large water accounts that are not always up to date on them, not always paying them in a timely manner.
Well, listen, I'm going to say something about this. You may not know, but 2 or 3 years ago, when they raised the water rate, I spoke at City Council, and I spoke at it again when I was told by the mayor's office that nobody's property had a lien on it because of water delinquency, water payment delinquency. And we came to find out, the News Journal put it out, that was false.
Exactly.
People did have liens on there. And but you're absolutely right. And again, to one of your pillars of your campaign, you're saying that transparency right there, just this simple issue, which is ongoing right now, shows the disconnect between government and the citizens of Wilmington. What say you?
Exactly. You're right. Like you said, a few years back, you were told that there were no liens, and then we do find out that there are. Very similar, a few months back, Councilwoman Shanae Darby had some legislation out there that was going to make sure that homeowners, owner-occupied homes, weren't foreclosed on by the city for water debt. Unfortunately, that legislation didn't pass because the majority of council voted it down. But during the committee hearings for that legislation, we also heard from the mayor's office that it wasn't true, that they weren't foreclosing on anyone's homes. And when we asked the question, tell us how many people are delinquent, tell us how many foreclosures are actually happening, the director of finance just sat there and said, I don't have those numbers right now. I'll have to get back to you.
Whoa. Are you serious? That's what he said?
That is exactly what occurred. And, I was there that day. I spoke in support of the legislation, and that's what we heard back from the finance director of the city of Wilmington on that day. Now, after doing some further digging, people were able to find out that, yes, about 40 homes have been foreclosed upon in the last 4 years due to water debt, or at least some sort of lien from the city. And I personally think, just one owner-occupied home being foreclosed on for something like water is just, it's a disgrace.
It's a disgrace and a travesty, and I will say that 100%. Now, living in the planet called Dunleaf out here, my neighbors are all 19720, which they get most of their water from artesian. And I don't think that going to private is any better than us maintaining the water. Now, let me just say this, and you may agree or disagree. I just think that Wilmington should maintain the water, or Wilmington Water, the utility, but I think it could be run better, like most things.
Exactly. I really think that we need to open up the books on that water utility and look into, is there waste, fraud, or abuse?
Right.
Because we've seen those rates go up every single year, and it's unsustainable from a budgetary standpoint. Because Wilmington actually collects a disproportionate amount of their general revenue from fees and fines. There's a great report that was put out by the University of Delaware not too long ago. And I'll make sure to share it on a comment under this video. But
Sure.
in that report, they said that the amount of revenue collected through fees and fines, so that includes, water billing, as well as any of the delinquency charges that go into it if you're behind. It also includes things like parking violations, red light tickets, things, L&I stuff. And in 2004, 2.8% of our general revenue was generated from those fines and fees.
Wow.
Today, it's 4.4%.
Wow, that's a lot.
So not only have we seen that go up by about 63%, the amount of the revenue that we collect from that, but the average American city of our size typically only has fees and fines making up 1 to 2% of their budget. In my opinion, if you make those fees and fines a larger piece of your budget, not only is that a regressive tax on the poor, because if you're making below poverty line or below, or even like 150 to 200% of the poverty line, that water bill is going to be a much larger part of your monthly budget than if you're doing really well and making a lot of money, right? So
Right.
we're holding the lowest income members of our community the most with these fees and fines. And the worst part is that we're not even collecting most of the revenue. We only get 44 cents on the dollar for what we collect from these things. And that's mostly because we spend so much money in our finance department to collect said fees and fines that we're not actually recouping the things that are owed to the city. We also use third-party vendors to collect those fees and fines as well. Third-party vendors that aren't even located in the state of Delaware.
Wow.
I think that taxpayer money should stay in the taxpayer location.
Yes, I agree with you. And I wasn't going to go to the parking, our parking violation and the stuff like that. A couple of years ago, I had walked in Wilmington and I saw a car being booted with the yellow boot on. And let me just say this. This has been an ongoing thing, and I'm going to stay just a little bit on it. This has been an ongoing thing for at least 3 administrations, at least when Dennis Williams was there. All of Przicki's administration and most of our previous one before that, whose name shall not be named because he was a terrible mayor before Dennis Williams. But yes, the parking, in my book and in like most people's book, fees and fines is nothing but another word for taxes. That's what a fee and a fine is. And on this show, on the Hard Talk with Jakim show, I've had libertarians on here, I have Democrats on here, I have Republicans on here, and everybody says the same thing, that we've got to do something with these fees, fines, basically taxing the crap out of poor people. We got to do something about that. What do you say about that?
I agree wholeheartedly. Because, I mean, not only are fees and fines are a flat tax, so at the end of the day, they end up being regressive because the lower your income, the more the proportion of your income that you're paying out in these fees and fines.
Right.
If you're really wealthy, what's a $40 parking ticket to you, right?
Right.
If you're living paycheck to paycheck or you're dealing with payday loans and things like that, that's a much bigger problem. And then we start falling into a domino effect of cascading, and that's how you get that cycle of poverty keeps reinforcing itself. And,
Right.
I'm not sure how widely broadcasted this was. Again, trust and transparency. But the city of Wilmington just recently had to settle a federal lawsuit in regards to the towing practices in this city. It was a Fourth Amendment case about search and seizure, because what we basically had was that we had a contract from a towing company telling the city that they were going to charge $0 to tow cars, but then they would turn around and they would charge those people a fee for the tow as well as a nightly fee for keeping it in the garage. So, and if you weren't able to go pay off your parking ticket and then go pay the tow company off within 30 days, they were scrapping vehicles and keeping the cash, which that's just straight up.
You're right. I did hear about it, but I don't think the average Joe Blow out on the street heard about how this was an illegal practice, and people were sounding the alarm then. We were sounding the alarm in 2012. We were sounding the alarm in 2017. And I'm glad that they settled, but you know how that settlement goes and blah blah blah.
Well,
you know
that's the problem, right? Because
Yes.
it's one of those settlements where the city did not admit fault. They just paid out some monetary damages to the plaintiffs, which are only 2 of the individuals out of how many that were affected by this,
exactly.
Right? I mean, honestly, it kind of begs the question: like, should it be a class action type of lawsuit where everybody that's been affected should get a piece of the pie? But
yes, yeah.
But yeah, we need to reform those practices and be honest about what certain city policies really do and what certain legislation really does. Because I've seen many times in council, during council meetings, you have council members standing up and saying legislation is going to do A, B, and C, and it's just flat out false.
Right. It's straight up lies, and I'll call it what it is. It's straight up lies. I've seen it a lot in the Wilmington City Council I've been down here 20 years now, and I've seen it. I've seen it in previous administrations, but I've been seeing it even more in this latest administration, because you can see that the citizens and the public wants to move one way, and the government is trying to keep that status quo. And that's a problem. Now, James, let me just ask you this. In fact, I just wanted to make sure you said a lot of times when the government admits to a wrongdoing that they did, it's almost, I come from a criminal law enforcement background. I retired law enforcement from New York. So it's almost like an Alfred plea. They admit to it, but they're not really admitting to the crime. And everybody goes about their way in the hope that it's a slow news cycle on that day. So, but let me ask you this. The question that I got from about 3 people were, how are you feeling about the residency requirement for employment in Wilmington?
So I am a strong supporter of a residency requirement in Wilmington. In fact, I think the current requirement now is 5 years. I would very much like to roll back the legislation and go back to where it was even more, right? If you want to work in this city, why wouldn't you want to live in this city, right? And again, it goes about keeping tax dollars within the community, because the salaries of people that work for the city are paid for by the taxpayers. So why wouldn't we want those people receiving those salaries to, spend it on buying a home here in Wilmington, or paying rent here in Wilmington, going to restaurants in Wilmington, shopping in Wilmington? We should keep that money here. But instead, we're seeing it go out of the city coffers, and it's not being spent in the community anymore. And specifically when it comes to the police, which, I'm not sure what your opinion is on this, being that you are a retired law enforcement officer, but I believe that the police...
Hold on, James.
Protect and serve.
Most cops would say, man, that guy's a thorn in our ass. Yes, I'm a retired law enforcement, but I have been a civic advocate for real police reform. And I'm not talking about what a lot of these people are talking about. Real police reform. And that has to come from the top. It's not from the bottom. But go ahead.
Well, really just reiterating that I think that if the police are coming from the communities that they protect and serve, I believe that it would yield better results. I believe that it would yield better relations between the community and the police. It would probably also lead to a decrease in crime, honestly. Is that something you agree with?
Not only do I agree with it, I've spoken at many of the representatives down in Dover. I've spoken against surveillance. I've spoken against enhanced surveillance. In fact, in my district, we have a former cop who's our state representative here, and I disagree on everything he talks about. And he was a bad cop. So not only do I agree with that you have to, it's no guarantee, don't get me wrong, it's no guarantee that you won't have abuse and you won't have over policing because somebody comes from the neighborhood. But
that's not a one.
The chances are you're going to have a more receptive police officer if they actually live in the place that they work.
Agreed. Yeah, it's not a one policy change solves all issues, but it's definitely in the right direction. And right now we have 2 police districts in the city of Wilmington that are participating in a community outreach program where they've reached out to some nonprofits that are people that live in the community to see if they can try to, bring down crime before it happens, right? Because a lot of the crime that we have in Wilmington, specifically gun crime, in my view, when I'm looking around, I'm seeing that it's a lot of, young people, it's a lot of gang-related things, it's a lot of retaliation-related things. But in these 2 police districts, they've tapped people in the communities that are well-respected, that know the relationships between the people that live there. And they've used that to try to stop retaliatory shootings and try to get people to come to the table and talk to each other before it gets to the point of violence. And those 2 police districts are actually one of the few districts in the city that has seen a decrease in crime, not a steady or increase. So
Right.
that would be something that I support as a council member as well. I think we should be putting more money into programs like that.
Yes, I absolutely think we should. Recently, I was involved. There was something with the mayor in Philadelphia, with Sherelle Parker, who is reaching out to so many of the people to try to reduce the crime. And let me just say one more stat on there, one more statistic, that then a lot of shootings, a lot of killings, whether it be in Wilmington or in Newcastle, there are a lot of them that are just straight up domestic violence as well. So as a domestic violence, there's those 2 things. I got many lanes, many highways that I grow in, but one of those is domestic violence. The other one is transportation, public transportation. Now, I got to be honest with you. For all y'all that's watching now, we're going to take a break in about a couple of minutes from here. But all of y'all that's watching now that are able to watch us because of the fallout with our computers and the internet today, I'm glad you're going to be able to watch us. Remember, you're going to be able to see this on the Hard Talk with Jakim show on YouTube and also on Delaware Info Now. You'll be able to see it again with Delaware Info Now. We're here with James Dahlke. Now, James, I'm going to give you this opportunity right now to tell the people how they can actually get in contact with you, whether they want to volunteer or donate money. Remember, you don't have to live in his district in order for you to support his candidacy. So how do they get in contact with you, James?
Yeah, so the best way to get in contact with me would be to go to my campaign website, which is jamesdahlkeforwilmington.com. And that's FOR4, jamesdahlkeforwilmington.com. You can also search that term on Facebook, where you'll find a donate button as well as the link to my website. So there you can go ahead and donate to the campaign. You can also give us your information if you're interested in volunteering. I plan to be out in the community a lot over the next, basically 2 months up until.
You gotta rock it now.
Yeah, I'm gonna be running down these streets, knocking on doors, calling people. So if you want to participate in that with me, if you want to work for positive, progressive change in Wilmington, please go to my website and get in touch, because I would love to work with you.
Yeah. So again, remember, Wilmington, our primary is September 10th. The primary is September 10th. And I want you to understand that it's the primary that you even get an inkling of choice. After the primary, you don't have any choice, but even that little inkling of choice right now. So again, this is Mr. James Dahlke. He's running for candidacy in the City Council District 7. We'll be right back with the Hard Talk with Jakim. I'm going to give you something to drink, and I'll be right back with the Hard Talk with Jakim with our guest, James Dahlke. Now, listen, let me see what I'm going to go. I'm going to play this from Martin Luther King for you. I'll be right back.
Martin Luther King Jr. once said, "Our lives begin to end the day we become silent about things that matter. Silence in the face of injustice is complicity. When you stay silent, you allow wrongs to continue unchallenged. Your voice is a weapon. Use it. Think about what sets your soul on fire. Equality, justice, human rights. Fight for these. Don't wait for others. Be the one who steps into the fray, who shouts the truth. Crush fear and complacency. Every time you speak out, you shake the foundations of oppression and inspire others to join you. Don't be
One of the problems with politicians is that they run experiments. Politicians, in my mind, they're like these doctors or these scientists that go into a lab and run an experiment, then they leave before the results come out. So they're not invested in the outcome of the experiment.
And they don't care how much damage is done.
Now, this is exactly the point. If you're any scientist of any repute, if you're running an experiment, you're going to be charged with the responsibility over that experiment. You're going to have to publish a paper going, this is what I did, these were my assumptions, this is how the experiment made manifest, these were the outcomes, and here are my recommendations and learnings. To the next person, don't do these things. Politicians don't bear that responsibility. So I can print money for a term, and by the time the repercussions of that come in, I'm gone.
I'm out of office.
I'm out of office. I can try things, and might or might not work, but life happens.
Well,
Next.
All right, big shout out to Vusi, man. Vusi was absolutely right. Our brother from South Africa. These politicians like to run the experiments and like to do all these things, but they don't like to stay around and see if they worked or be held accountable. We're back again talking with with a candidate from Wilmington City Council for District 7, Mr. James Dahlke. Now, Mr. James Dahlke, I will ask you a question about land development in Wilmington. I don't know, we're watched in Texas and New Jersey and New York and Georgia. If y'all come to Wilmington, especially Market Street, you're going to see a lot of new things on Market Street. How do you feel about the land development in the city of Wilmington?
Well, this ties into my second pillar, which is development without displacement, right? Because you're correct. Over the last 10 to 15 years, especially the last 8 years of this mayoral administration, we have seen an explosive boom of private property development, especially in the downtown area. We basically took the development that was happening in the riverfront and we said, let's move it all the way up Market Street and just let it keep going. And, while new shiny buildings are nice, we can't do it at the demise of our existing neighborhoods and our existing residents. I look at some of these high rises downtown and the prices on some of these condominiums or apartments. And I just think to myself, who is living there? Who can afford to live there? Because, Wilmington is a majority renter city. Over 50% of residents are renters, right? Only 12% of those renters pay more than $2,000 a month on their rent, right? Now, if you go look up some of those buildings that are downtown or at the riverfront, almost every single one of them is more than $2,000. So you're saying that, we're building all these new units, which is great. We need more housing stock, not only in the city, in the state, but in the country as a whole. But we got to make sure that housing stock is affordable, right? So why are we allowing all this development and giving tax abatements to these landlords while not getting anything back in return? Because yes, there are a few nonprofits that do, low to moderate income rental housing in the city, but they don't get enough investment. They don't get enough support for what they do, right? Here in my district, we have the Woodlawn Trustees, which has a very large affordable housing development, and they're building more, which is great. I absolutely support that. And, we've seen some investment on the east side, but I question, is that money really being used adequately? Because it's been how many years, and I'm not seeing the actual houses going up. I'm not seeing the people moving in. And that's, again, trust and transparency. We can't just have, the mayor and council members come up for a fancy ribbon cutting and pat themselves on the back and say, we're investing so much ARPA funds in this. We need them to show back up when the buildings are built and the families are moving in to show us that it's actually happening.
Well, listen, James, let me jump in here. You're absolutely right. We've had in the Wilmington, the land bank, we know about that fiasco. Yes, and when these developers, and it always seems as though when I'm walking down Market Street or when I'm on Pine or when I'm in the city and people say, hey, listen, man, Jakim, this is that. And they always talking about this one developer. They said this one developer is doing all this stuff and he's monopolizing. This company is monopolizing it. I'm not really pissed off about the monopoly. I'm pissed off that there's no set-asides, that there is no set-asides for some of the housing to be for people, and at this point, well, I don't even like to say middle class anymore, because right now it's either rich or poor. But
yeah,
yes,
unfortunately, the middle class in this country
has been decimated. Yes, that, you know, what they consider middle class now is actually ultra rich. But yeah, we haven't seen so many people say, okay, developer and the set-asides. And yes, I'm going to go piggyback on something you said, and I wanted you to extend that. When we give these 5 years tax abatements, that these companies stay here for 5 years, get that tax abatement where they're not paying little to nothing taxes, and then they leave. Capital One did that to us, and I always say, who allowed that?
Exactly, I agree. You know, the fundamental idea behind tax abatements or tax incentives is that we're hoping that the investment this private company makes in the city is going to end up generating more economic externalities, so that the city generates more revenue than we gave them back in tax abatements. But are we actually going and looking to make sure that that's happening?
Right.
Because I think it's not. Like you said, Capital One is a perfect example, and now they've vacated the city.
Yeah.
You know, if you can show me that the tax abatement actually does generate more economic revenue for the city in general, then, you know, let's talk about it. But we haven't done those studies. We haven't made sure that's happening. We're just handing it out to developers because the common thought of government is that this is what you do.
And that's,
you know, right.
Excuse me, I didn't want to cut you off, but and that is part of the problem. What we've always done is not how we should be moving forward anyway.
Yeah, we have to ask ourselves, why is the status quo the status quo? And is the status quo working? Because if it's not working, we need to change it. And that's what the job of a legislator is. That's what the job of a council person is to enact law to change those policies so that we can move in the direction that the people want.
That's right. And listen, let me just throw this out there, and I know it's not under the preview or purview of the city and mostly of the state, but a perfect example of that is the Port of Wilmington. And we had people move in, people move out, people move in,
Yep.
people move out, and yet we're still moving forward with a container port and Edgemore when we can't even solidify and make these people responsible. I go so far back as that when Jack Markell made that crazy deal with Fisker. So I go way back with us giving money to corporations and then they break it out. Let me just give you one more thing about that. One of the things that I have found when I came down here almost 20 years ago was that there's too many of these memorandums of understanding. And of course, these memorandums of understanding, I had a lot of civic people here in Newcastle bet their lives on these things, and these things aren't worth the paper they're printed on. Just because you're a civic organization and the company says, oh, we're going to do this, we're going to do that, we're going to do this. The Albert School in Southbridge is a perfect example of it. Mm-hmm. Stop thinking these memorandums of understanding mean anything. Because as far as I'm concerned, if you have no enforcement of it, they mean nothing. What do you say there?
Agreed. If government entities are going to make deals with private companies, then we need to have some teeth on those deals. We need to be able to come back when those private companies don't hold up their side of the bargain and hold them accountable. Because, you know, like you said, with the port, you know, we created this quasi-private government organization to run the port, right? And we gave them how much money of state taxpayer funding. And they contracted with the subsidiary of a Saudi Arabian oil company, Gulftainer, right? And so, you know, then how many years later Gulftainer goes bankrupt? Well, guess what? Gulftainer already got the millions of dollars we gave them. We're not getting it back. So, and now we're just going to start the process all over again with another company. You know, I hope that this company works out, because the port is a very good generator of economic stability. for not just our city, but also our state. And it's also a source of good union jobs. You know, those union jobs at the port used to be the hallmark of the middle class here in Wilmington.
That's correct.
And those jobs have since long gone away, just like the jobs that Chrysler and GM did.
That's right. I agree with you 100%. I'm a big proponent because I live not less than a mile away from the port. And, what has happened with the port, and this is nothing for, city of Wilmington, don't really have a thing, but I'm going to say this. Our executive branch of government, the governors that have been there that allowed this port to go through all of these cycles, knowing that we needed to make this port stronger, and by making it stronger, we would have had economic viability. Let me just give you an example. When the Keys Bridge was hit, we are the next port up, not Philadelphia. We are the next port up. But if we had it, there's no idea of trying to get ready. We need to be ready. And I find that our government is not being ready. They have no idea of what readiness is. But I'm spatting off y'all. Y'all.
No, but let me just go. You're right. We need to be more proactive with thinking about economic development and stability in such a way. Because you're right, we are the next port up. And yes, we did see an increase in port activity, but we're nowhere equipped to do the same amount of port activity as Baltimore was. So even though ours went up, they had to send more to Philadelphia, places in New Jersey, and places in New York as well, because we didn't have the capacity to take it all on. And you are correct. As a council member, really has a little power over what happens with the port. But what our Wilmington government needs to do more of is throw the weight around in Dover, because we are the largest city in the state. Yet, for some reason, we have to go down to the state legislature like paupers with our hands out, asking for everything.
Begging for more porridge every time. It's ridiculous of how they have Wilmington in a stranglehold, that this city is the largest city in Delaware. We have so many companies actually incorporate here. We've got 501c3s out the yin yang, and it's terrible. And we have no school district in Wilmington.
Yeah.
So I'm just going to go with it from there. Let me just, before we leave, before we go on another break, because we're going to give everybody an opportunity to get in contact with you, give them again how to get in contact with you, James.
Yes, so if you want to be involved in my campaign or you want to donate to the movement, please go to my campaign website, which is jamesdahlke4wilmington.com. That's James Dahlke, F-O-R, Wilmington.com. You can also look me up on Facebook under the same name.
All right. And you look him up on the Facebook, he got that nice suit on, yo. I'll talk to you. All right. This has been the Hard Talk with Jakim show. I will be right back with the Hard Talk with Jakim. Peace. See you on the other side.
There's always so much sympathy for folks like that. People say, well, I have a cousin who feels that way. She's not so bad. My aunt voted for Donald Trump, and she's a nice person. My mother supports him. She doesn't like his tweets, but she's not terrible. Here's the news flash. Your aunt, your mother, your grandmother, whoever supports that philosophy, they actually are terrible people. That actually is garbage when you support racism. It doesn't matter how related you are. But we extend humanity to folks like that, and so little humanity for folks who look like us. When you
Is there anything that could happen with him indictment-wise that would say, all right, maybe this disqualifies him for president?
Not for me. I'm with him to the finish.
All right, thank you so much.
He could stand on the front steps of the White House and commit murder, and I'm with him.
All right, y'all, this is the Hard Talk with Jakim show. I'm back. Wow. And I'm not going to be talking about so much of national news. I'll be doing it during the week. We also got to remember that we're the Delaware Black Commission will be doing their endorsements on Monday. Monday, they're going to be doing their endorsements. I may be the founder of it, but I do not have the final say in this stuff. And believe you me, I've been getting some crazy stuff. Some of the members are trying to endorse people that I really don't. But you know what? That's what unity is about. Yeah, they may see something I don't see. And so when we put out those endorsements on Monday, I think the first ones are going to be state representatives and state senators, if there's any of them, and the state offices. So Monday, check us out, the Delaware Black Commission. Now, listen, we're back here with James Dahlke, candidate for City Council District 7. Now, I have another question that is Wilmington related, is really Wilmington related. And big shout out to all the folks that sent me those emails over, even the crackpots. I love you too, crackpots. Here's a question. In Wilmington, the demographics is about 70%, I believe, of African American, and then it's a mixture of everything now. How in your district, I don't know what your demographics is in your district, but how are you going to address some of the things that African Americans in your district may want the city to address? And I don't think they're different than anybody else's. Get it?
I mean, I agree. I think that the Black community wants the same things that we probably all do, right? We want, good jobs, housing stability, the ability to progress economically. And I think that my platform really uplifts all of that stuff. So I personally believe that a lot of social issues run downstream from economics. So if we can fix economic issues for people, whether you're a person of color or not, then we can uplift communities and solve social ills as well.
That is correct. I put a thing out this week. I put a meme out this week on my Facebook and Instagram and TikTok. Remember, you can always check me out at The Real Jakim on Facebook, Instagram, whatever. I'm all over the place. Economic systems, political structures, social dynamics, awareness, critical thinking. Let me just tell you, I'm a big fan of critical thinking, man. And the last piece of that has to be empathy. If you don't show empathy, I can't have empathy for you. So I think a lot of our politicians don't show any empathy for the people that they're supposed to be speaking up for and representing. James, let me give you one more thing. Getting back to the land issue. Now, I live in the 16th RD representative district, and Luxor is in our district. ShopRite is in our district. So we're all in the same district. So is Southbridge, which is in my district as well. The land issue has been an issue for some time now in Wilmington. Taking of properties, eminent domain in some cases, a couple of years back. Here's the thing that people always talk to me when they see me on a bus or anything like that, is that they say, they tearing down good houses and putting up these prefab structures. And with this climate change as it is, yes, I have to agree in some ways they're getting away with a lot of it. And especially in Wilmington, I saw that they're getting away with tearing down historical landmark type buildings to actually put up these monstrosities. What do you say about that?
Yeah, so, we have a large amount of vacant or dilapidated homes in the city, homes that are falling apart, nobody's lived there for a while, right? And the land bank sometimes wants to tear these places down, and like you said, replace them with something new. And I do have to question: is that fiscally responsible? Is it environmentally responsible? And then on top of that, I've spoken to. I work in the financial services industry, so I work in a bank branch. I have clients that flip homes that are like micro developers, and I've spoken to some of them before, and they've said that because of our zoning practices and because of the way some of these homes were built, if you tear it down, you can't build a new home on that lot up to current code today. So sometimes when we're tearing these houses down, we're just saying this is going to be a vacant piece of grass now until someone comes and knocks down like an entire block and then builds an entire new block. Which, you know, some people, that may be what they're looking for, is that they'd rather knock down a whole block and start from scratch. But we have the bones of this city already. Why don't we work to renovate the existing housing stock and getting homeowners and families, working families, into those properties instead of into the hands of more developers and more landlords?
Yeah, I agree with you, man, and you're absolutely right. Our guest last week, we worked on some projects together down in Dover for lead testing and childhood lead testing and lead testing period. And knowing that Biden and other presidents, but mostly Biden, said that we have to replace all of our lead pipes. I mean, the Flint, Michigan stuff is real for all of our communities, whether it be Newark, New Jersey, or Flint, Michigan, or other places. So we have a big infrastructure dealing that we have to do, but we don't need to compound it by tearing down things that really need rehab more than just new construction.
Exactly, because I'm not a builder myself, but I have to imagine that renovating an existing property to make it livable and safe has to be cheaper than starting from scratch, especially if you got to bring that property down to begin with, because demolition is not cheap either. And then it also makes you question, are we demolishing things in a way that's safe and healthy for the community? Because like you just said, if there's lead, if there's asbestos, if there's other contaminants, are we just putting that up into the air? I don't know.
That's right. And again, this is one of the issues that we without getting into environmental justice, which is a whole show by itself, believe you me, it's a whole show by itself. Without getting into it, this particular, our Delaware, our great state of Delaware has done basically, to me, almost zero in protecting one of our biggest assets, which is our environment. Whether it be allowing these major polluters to come into black and brown neighborhoods or any neighborhood. Don't get me wrong. I live on Route 9 corridor where we have a lot of the major polluters, but we have seen major polluters in Newark. We have seen major polluters try to put banks and power stations and things that we're doing in even affluent or middle affluent neighborhoods. We have to do better. And I think the city council, who has control over zoning, needs to do a little bit more about giving out these commercial and mixed use zone type things. What do you say?
I agree, because you're right. The city council has a lot of power there when it comes to zoning. So, and I think zoning laws in general are one of those pieces of local government that not a lot of people are very well versed on, right? Because unless you're going to seek out the information, or unless you're some developer that needs to navigate the zoning laws, why would it come to your attention, right? So definitely council needs to be proactive in making sure that we use the power of zoning laws to ensure that we are enacting environmental justice and that we aren't allowing polluters to just run amok. And also, we need to strengthen our neighborhood councils, because there are neighborhood councils in the city that can go ahead and make input on zoning, but a lot of them are barely attended, and so therefore things go unnoticed.
Hold on, let me just push back on that, James. It's barely attended by design. I think the last couple of administrations, and I'm a registered Democrat, and I was the chairman of the 16th RD for 7 years. I think it was done by design so they can get developers to go in there. Because when I came down here, we had strong district councils. We had strong citizen councils. What happened was they started doing it by design. The powers to be, that's by design, because every time, Delaware is very cliquish. Let's call it what it is. We're a very click state. We're a small state, but we're very cliquish.
State of neighbors, right?
Right. And very cliquish. If you don't like this or you say something about this person, then automatically they go and tell their friends, whatever. That's how they destroyed those things. And let me tell you something. It's a bad thing for a community when you do not have a good civic association. What do you say?
Yeah, no, I agree. A lot of organizing structures do, by design, make it difficult for people to participate. And again, it goes back to this trust and transparency idea, where, we should not be saying to our community members, well, if you wanted to be involved, you would have sought out the information, figured it out, and come to the meeting. We need to tell people the meeting exists. This is what this committee does and what they have power over, and this is why you should come out and talk about it and hear about what's going on.
And be on it. That's right. Listen, we're talking with James Dahlke, candidate for City Council District 7. We're going to take our final break, and then we're going to be right back with the Hard Talk with Jakim show. See you on the flip side.
Because when I get on a plane, I don't expect the airline to tell me they have a few bad apples on the flight crew. Or when I go to the emergency room, I don't expect the doctors to tell me there's a few bad apples working in the emergency room that day. And so the citizens of Pennsylvania do not expect from their law enforcement to have a few bad apples.
Many times when a white male or even a white female is charged, there's an effort to either minimize the charges to the bare minimum or not overcharge at all. But then an African American is charged, black or brown person, there's this sentiment to overcharge them, to make the charges extreme, knowing many of them would not stick, and then making them fight to get those charges dropped. I'm sure you've seen.
Peace and blessings, y'all. This is Jakim from the Hard Talk with Jakim. Listen, today I'm going to talk about the Delaware Black Commission. Next Monday, July 22nd, we are going to have our endorsements for state offices, elected state offices in Delaware. So if you want to be able to send us some information about why we should endorse your particular candidate, send it to btom6164. That's BTHOMP 6164 at gmail.com. We may consider it. All right, the Delaware Black Commission. Peace.
All right, y'all. Listen, you only got a couple of more days. Yes, I've been getting a lot of emails. Yes, you've been DMing me. You've been giving me your candidates. Like I said, we're going to, the 15 members of the Delaware Black Commission will make that decision. It's not just my decision. They're going to make the decision on who they're going to endorse here. And then we'll move on to Newcastle County and, of course, City Council. So let me just say this, James, and thank you. You've been a wonderful guest here tonight. I know they probably said you probably going to go through the ringer with me, but now we don't do that unless it's necessary. If you was a crazy libertarian to come in here, and don't get me wrong, big shout out to all my libertarian fans. I would be a libertarian, but you're too darn going racist. But you dig what I'm saying. But we're having a great talk. We're having a straight talk, a straight no nonsense talk with James Dahlke, a candidate for City Council District 7. Now, James, I'm going to give you this particular time before we get on out of here to tell me anything else about your platform or what you got to do. You got about 5 minutes. The floor is yours.
Yeah, so Jakim, again, thank you so much for having me on the show this evening. This has been a great conversation, and you've had some great questions for me. I love really getting down into the details when it comes to policy and economics. I mean, my background in finance, that's a passion of mine. And I've worked in areas that are low income. I've worked in areas that are ultra wealthy. And, I've seen how economics and economic stability and financial literacy can shape a community. So, again, my pillars, trust and transparency. Our government needs to actively ask the people to participate. not just hope that they show up. We need to tell people when legislation is filed, what that legislation is going to do, and then solicit their response. Development without displacement. We got to make sure that we have set-asides for affordable housing, because we have a lot of low to moderate income communities in the city of Wilmington, and they just can't afford to live in some of these high-price high-rises. We need to not forget those people. They are vital. They are the backbone of this community, of this city. Fees and fines reform. Again, we can't disproportionately punish those with the least means in order to fund our general budget, right? We need to make sure that we have a general fund that can provide the services that the people of our city need. And moving forward, we're going to have to pony up money for more services, right? I mean, over the last year, we found out that St. Francis Hospital is no longer going to be able to provide ambulatory services at no charge. So the city had to put $4 million in the budget to prop up their own service, right? Also, like you said, with what's going on with the water today, with it being stinky, you know, what infrastructure investment do we need to make sure that doesn't happen anymore? What infrastructure investment do we need to make sure that our pipes are safe and that we don't have lead? Also, you know, the EPA has a new regulations now about PFAS, those forever chemicals that come to us from, you know, our lovely legacy of DuPont, right?
DuPont.
So how much money are we going to have to spend to get our water utility up to the new regulations? And how are we going to generate that money? Because let me tell you, just spiking people's water bills is not going to bring the millions of dollars necessary to overhaul this utility system. Yeah. And that's really where it comes into the fiscal sustainability, right? Because my background's in finance. I understand how numbers work. I understand how economics and books work, right? And the way that we are progressing, if we keep doing it the way we are doing it, at some point we're going to become insolvent.
Yes.
You can't just keep kicking the can down the road. You got to figure out, how do we build a budget that works for everybody, is sustainable, and provides the services that our citizens need and deserve.
That's right. Listen, before we get out of here, let me just go on a subject that's been on our tongues the last couple of months: the homelessness here in Delaware. We on the Route 9 card and the Route 13 card have a young lady that's actually basically living in a bus stop. And everybody sees it. State representative, everybody sees it. Nobody says anything about it. I'm telling you right now, when we got women living in a bus shelter, we've got problems. Now, we lost a lot of beds when the YMCA closed their shelter, and we lost a lot of beds when the other one that was on 2nd Street, closed near the fire department. What are we going to do as to get some real, and breakfast, Sunday Breakfast Mission doing a great job. What would you propose that we do? Because the Hope Center is not in the city, and the Hope Center is in the boonies in a swamp. So that has no bus service. So of course, a lot of people, if you don't know, DART will be sending a bus service out there in September. I'm on the advisory committee for DART. What do you think we should do about this homeless? And I know that's a big question.
It is definitely a big question, and it's not just Wilmington or Delaware; it's the country in general that we're struggling with. Yes, it is. Right? You know, I definitely do think it's a big issue, and I think that it ties into the affordable housing stability, and wraparound services for people. Personally, I'm a housing first kind of guy. I think the best thing that we can do for our unhoused population is get them housed, and then we can help them work out any other issue, whether that be mental health or addiction. I think what the county did with the Hope Center is great, having some sort of center where people can have a respite and then also have those wraparound services. But you're right, it's not in the city. You can't get there.
Hold. And now I got to do a pushback on it, because the only thing is now we're providing it. Now our taxpayer money is running it. Now it was a bad decision. We paid too much money for it. It was in a swamp, because I DJ a lot, and I DJ there, and I know the Sheridan I-95 to the back of my hand. But I will say this: it was a good thinking idea. The implement was terrible.
I will agree with that. Yes. I know that it came out that there seemed to be some fraud, waste, and abuse from the nonprofits that were tapped to run the center. So now the county itself is footing the bill. I think the concept of having a place like that is a good idea, but you're right. The implementation could have been done better. And we need to ask, again, we gave taxpayer funds to these companies, and what did they do for us? That money's not coming back, right? But I would love to see something similar done in the city of Wilmington, because the unhoused population in Delaware is mostly congregated in Wilmington. Probably because, it's a walkable city where you can get around easily.
Right, it's a city.
Exactly. And that's what happens to people without housing, is that they tend to congregate in places like that. So I grew up in Los Angeles, California, which probably has one of the worst housing crises in America, right?
Yeah, well, I know Los Angeles very well.
Yeah, so you got Skid Row out there, right?
Yes, you do.
So this is a very important issue to me, housing and homelessness, because my mother actually worked on Skid Row for a while in a halfway house, helping people get off the street and getting them into single occupancy residences, right? So that they could then, try to get back up on their feet. And so I've seen intimately, some of those issues that lead to the homelessness and how it affects a city and how a city responds to it, how that affects the problem as well. And let me tell you, it's not something that we can just ignore.
Right, we can't ignore it.
It's not going away, and we can't just ship people out of the city and hope that the problem will solve itself.
Yeah, that is it. You're absolutely right, man. And look, we went over a little bit of time, because I had to throw that one. That was a lob I had to throw at you, man. So listen, again, tell the people how they can get in contact with James Dahlke's campaign so they can volunteer or send money.
Yes, so if you want to get in contact with me, if you want to donate to my campaign, or you want to volunteer your time, please go to my campaign website. It's JamesDahlke for Wilmington.com. That's James Dahlke, FOR Wilmington.com. You can also get a link to that website through my Facebook that's attached to this stream.
Perfect. Listen, man, it's been a pleasure having you on the show. We've gotten to some really straight talk. We got some real nitty gritty, and it's been a pleasure, man. Again, remember, this has been the Hard Talk with Jakim show. And if you have a candidate that you want, remember for us to endorse for the Delaware Black Commission. You can get us at BTOMP, BTHOMP 6164 at gmail.com. Get it to us before Monday. All right, y'all. I'm going to leave you with Martin Luther King, and I'm going to see you on the flip side. Thank you, James, and you have a great night, man. All right.
You women better wake up if you want to help to change America around. You do the work. You better wake up, and don't be afraid. Have confidence in yourself.
All we say to America is be true to what you said on paper. If I lived in